You're climbing through the sky at 5,000 feet, the engines roaring behind you. Everything normal, until your co-pilot turns to you and says, "Why did you shut off the engines?" And you say, "I didn't." But it's too late. The plane is going down. The voice recorder is running. And what those final seconds reveal has just been leaked to the world. This isn't just another crash. This may be something much darker. What you're about to hear is something that was never meant for the public. A confidential cockpit recording from the Air India flight that went down, now exposed. And what it reveals has sent a shockwave through the entire aviation community. Let's set the record straight. This wasn't just another accident. A month after it happened, this tragedy is still dominating headlines in every corner of the planet. Not because of the size of the aircraft, not because of the weather, but because of what the pilots said in their final moments. According to a leak obtained by the Wall Street Journal, audio pulled directly from the cockpit voice recorder paints a terrifying, almost surreal picture of what took place. Here's what we know. The aircraft was being flown not by the captain, but by the first officer. And for anyone outside aviation, that might sound unusual, but let me tell you, it's completely standard. Pilots share flying duties. One takes the outbound leg, the other handles the return. In the cockpit, we call them legs. So the first officer flying, that's nothing out of the ordinary. But what happened next is. From the leaked audio, the co-pilot, flying the aircraft, suddenly turns to the captain and asks, "Why did you shut off the engines?" There's no panic in that first question. It's shock, confusion. He was expecting thrust. He got silence. The captain calmly replies, "I didn't." 6 seconds. That's how long the co-pilot keeps asking that question, over and over again. Why did you shut them off? Why did you shut them off? 6 seconds of rising panic. He knew exactly what this meant. No power, no time, no chance. From that point, investigators believe the co-pilot understood he was no longer in control of a mechanical failure. He was inside a deliberate, human-made catastrophe. And here's where it gets chilling. The captain, according to the leaked tape, remained calm, ice cold, not a trace of fear in his voice. And that changes the picture completely. Because when you're in a crisis at 200 knots, instinct kicks in. Your voice changes, your adrenaline spikes. But if you're calm, if you're collected, you knew it was coming. So who really shut off the engines? If you're imagining a modern airliner, you might think there's a big red button you push. It's not like that. These engines are powered and monitored through what's called fuel cutoff switches. Start levers. If you pull them, you starve the engines of fuel. They shut down. Simple as that. Now here's where things get interesting. This was a Boeing and not an Airbus. That matters. Why? Because in Boeings, during takeoff, the pilot flying uses both hands on the yoke, those control horns you've probably seen in pictures. That means if the first officer was flying the plane, his hands were on the yoke. He wouldn't be reaching down to kill the fuel. But the captain? His job at that point is to monitor systems, call out speeds, retract the gear. His hands are free. So who had the access? Who had the opportunity? All evidence from that cockpit suggests the captain was the only one who could have cut fuel to both engines right after liftoff, the moment where the aircraft needs maximum thrust to climb. Seconds later, the start levers were moved again, restoring fuel flow. But by then, it was over. Altitude was lost. There was no recovery. But here's the twist that no one expected. The man suspected of bringing down the aircraft, the captain, wasn't just some anonymous figure in the left seat. He was an instructor, a senior pilot, a respected voice in the airline. By all accounts, meticulous, sober, soft-spoken, never cursed, didn't drink, someone described by his colleagues as a textbook professional. So how does someone like that, 56 years old, with thousands of hours, trusted to teach other pilots, do something so horrific? That's where this story gets murky, because according to people close to him, the captain had recently lost his mother in 2022, and that hit him hard. Reports say he sought psychological help, that he battled depression, that he was still carrying that weight. And yet, he was also known as a devoted son. He cared for his elderly father, 80 years old. Days before the crash, he told his dad he was planning to resign, that he wanted to be home more, that he wanted to take care of him full time. He even promised he'd call him as soon as the flight landed in London. So ask yourself, does that sound like a man planning to take 260 lives, or someone holding on to something? Because right now, what we're looking at is a case that's unraveling faster than anyone expected. It's not just a black and white mechanical failure. It's a psychological mystery, a human riddle. And this leak? It might just be the beginning.
But let's step back for a moment. If this was intentional, why leak it? Because this recording wasn't supposed to get out. It was part of an active investigation, protected evidence from the black boxes, sealed, confidential. Yet somehow it ended up in the hands of the Wall Street Journal. Now you've got to ask the question every pilot hates to ask. Who stands to gain? Because when something leaks during an investigation, it's usually not an accident. It's strategy. So let's look at the players. The National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, is involved. And that's significant. For those outside the industry, the NTSB is the gold standard in air crash investigation. If there's a wreck on U.S. soil, or if a U.S.-built aircraft goes down anywhere in the world, they get involved. And in this case, they have a reason. The aircraft was a Boeing, a U.S.-made machine, the pride of American aviation. So Boeing has skin in the game, a lot of it. And if the black box reveals that this wasn't a mechanical failure, but human error, Boeing is off the hook. Their reputation? Protected. Their stock? Safe. Their aircraft orders? Uninterrupted. So yeah, a leak like this, well, it might just help shift the spotlight away from the jet and squarely onto the man flying it. Now, I'm not saying Boeing leaked it. I don't have that kind of evidence, but I've been around long enough to know how these things work. You've got U.S. investigators working with Indian authorities. You've got a powerful manufacturer under global scrutiny, and suddenly a leak appears that clears the aircraft and condemns the pilot. Convenient? Maybe, but there's more. Multiple sources have said that American investigators have grown frustrated, claiming their Indian counterparts lack the technical ability to properly handle a case this complex. They've even threatened to pull out of the investigation. That's a serious claim, and it shows you just how much tension is building beneath the surface. On one side, you've got the Indian government, the airline, the pilots' union, all trying to protect their own. On the other, Boeing and U.S. officials trying to get ahead of the narrative. And right in the middle of it all is that cockpit recording. Now let's go back to the pilot for a second. The captain, the man at the center of this storm. If this leak is true, if he did intentionally shut off the engines, then we're talking about an act of unthinkable darkness. One man making a decision that ended the lives of 260 innocent people. But the psychology doesn't add up. This was a man who cared deeply for his family, who told his elderly father just days earlier that he planned to quit flying, who promised to call him as soon as he landed in London. You don't do that if you've made up your mind to die mid-flight. You don't say goodbye with hope in your voice. And yet, the facts are staring us in the face. The engines were shut down manually. The start levers moved. Fuel was cut off. The first officer reacted in real time, panicked, confused, helpless, and the captain responded by silence. No distress call, no checklist, no emergency drill, just calm. And that calm is what haunts people. Because in aviation, calm is supposed to be a sign of control. But in this case, it may have been a sign of acceptance. So what do you believe? Do you believe this was a man unraveling quietly in his own grief who snapped in the sky? Or do you believe this was a seasoned pilot caught in the middle of a tragic mechanical chain reaction, now being painted as the villain to protect reputations, companies, and national pride? There's something else that needs to be said. If Boeing walks away clean from this, if this entire tragedy gets chalked up to a pilot's mental health, then the public will never get the full story. Because real aviation safety doesn't come from blame. It comes from truth. Cold, hard, uncomfortable truth. But when truth gets filtered through politics, business, and global diplomacy, things get murky. And right now, nothing's clear. Let me know when you're ready for part 3. We'll finish what the leak began and ask the most uncomfortable question of all. Was this avoidable? And who's really responsible? If everything we're hearing from this leak is true, then this wasn't just a crash. It was a controlled, calculated descent into tragedy, triggered by the very person trusted to prevent it. But hold on. Before we settle into any conclusions, there's one more piece of this story that changes the frame completely. This captain, the man who may have pulled those switches, wasn't just a senior instructor or a company man. He was someone described by colleagues as deeply moral, highly respected, clean living, and emotionally connected to his family. He had no history of misconduct, no safety violations. He was known for mentoring younger pilots, for his discipline, and even for the formality of his speech. And that's why none of this makes sense, because everything about him points in the opposite direction of a man planning mass murder. So what happened? That question is now tearing at the core of this investigation. The official narrative, the one quietly forming, is leaning toward the simplest explanation, that this man, after suffering the long-term emotional weight of depression and the loss of his mother, may have reached a breaking point, that maybe, just maybe, something inside him snapped in the cockpit that day. But hold on. Before we settle into any conclusions, there's one more piece of this story that changes the frame completely. This captain, the man who may have pulled those switches, wasn't just a senior instructor or a company man. He was someone described by colleagues as deeply moral, highly respected, clean living, and emotionally connected to his family. He had no history of misconduct, no safety violations. He was known for mentoring younger pilots, for his discipline, and even for the formality of his speech. And that's why none of this makes sense, because everything about him points in the opposite direction of a man planning mass murder. So what happened? That question is now tearing at the core of this investigation. The official narrative, the one quietly forming, is leaning toward the simplest explanation, that this man, after suffering the long-term emotional weight of depression and the loss of his mother, may have reached a breaking point, that maybe, just maybe, something inside him snapped in the cockpit that day. But here's what complicates that theory. In the days before the flight, he didn't isolate, he didn't withdraw. He made plans. He told his father he'd be quitting the airline soon to take care of him full-time. He told him he'd call after landing. That's not the behavior of someone who's decided to end their life. Unless he changed his mind in that final moment. Unless something happened on board that pushed him over the edge. Or unless he didn't do it at all. Because even though the leak seems damning, it's still just one part of the puzzle. The official report isn't out yet. And what we're dealing with here is not just technical. It's political, psychological, and corporate. You've got the Indian Pilots Union, which immediately responded to the leak, rejecting the implications. They say the recording is being twisted to pin the blame on one of their own, and they're demanding transparency. They've even threatened legal action if this continues. And honestly, I don't blame them. Because you also have Boeing, a company under more pressure now than ever before. With multiple crashes in recent years and major public trust issues, they have everything to gain from shifting the spotlight onto human error. And make no mistake, if this turns out to be pilot suicide, Boeing is in the clear. There's no faulty design, no bad sensor, no software issue, just a man, one man, a scapegoat maybe. But is that what really happened? That's the terrifying part. We don't know. Because when something this big happens, with lives lost, governments involved, and reputations on the line, the truth often gets buried. Behind closed doors, behind red tape, behind press conferences and bullet-pointed safety briefings. But let's not forget what this is really about. This was a plane with 260 souls on board. Men, women, children, people with jobs to return to, families waiting, lives in motion. None of them ever expected that the flight they boarded would end in a field of fire. And now we're left with a single haunting exchange. Why did you shut off the engines? I didn't. And maybe he really didn't. Maybe the answer is more complex than we can grasp. Maybe the system failed in some way we haven't seen yet. Or maybe someone, somewhere, wanted this to look like human error, because the alternative, mechanical failure, would cost too much. Too much money, too much credibility, too much trust. Whatever the truth is, it deserves to come out. Because the moment we start accepting leaks as conclusions, we stop learning. And in aviation, not learning is the deadliest thing we can do. So to every pilot watching this, and to every passenger who's ever looked out an aircraft window with wonder, remember this. Safety isn't just built into the systems. It's built into the stories we tell, the honesty we demand, the accountability we fight for. Until the full report is released, we owe it to every soul on that aircraft to stay skeptical, to stay curious, to keep pushing for the whole truth, not just the convenient one. Because somewhere out there, the real cause is still waiting to be confirmed. And it might not be what we think. Blue skies, everyone, and fly safe.